My name is James Belohovek, and I got the job working on the thing. I was still going to CalArts. I put together this really meager portfolio of cardboard and plastic models that I had made by myself. Well, I took it over to John Van Vliet, who was working at Disney at the time on Tron, and he looked at my portfolio. He was fairly quiet about it, and he was turning the pages and checking to see, and I was very nervous. He told me to call up this girl named Susan Turner, and she needs some help on a model. So boy, was I excited, and I called up Susan Turner, and I was went down to VCE, which was in Hollywood at the time. So after I would go to work at the store, I would drive all the way down to Hollywood and work on the model, the flying saucer. She had me start on working on the vents that were around, made out of, it was brass. I had to cut them out of it with tin shears. But she showed me the vacuum form pieces that she had done, and she had already cut out the holes that went for the vents. And so, one by one, I made these things. After about 2 weeks of working on the vents, I came in, she sat me down. She said, I think you're working too fast. I don't think you're doing a very good job of this. Why don't you start pacing yourself and don't try to rush it and see if we can make these things a little better. And so I felt really bad because I had to make most of them over again. But it was a learning curve, and she could have fired me, but she didn't. She had the patience to have me sit down and do this. Once I was done with events, then I started working on some of the surface detail. She had a lot of it done, little panels and things like that, but some of the other things, like the engines, she had me make as well. Once I got done with the engines and some of the surface detail that the engines had on them, I also did the little hatch ring on top of the dome that was there. And then she had me start working on the inside of the saucer, helping make the light rings that went around. And so 144 of these things that had to make a double ring and put these things together. I made two of those rings so in case one burned out. I think Susan really wanted kind of the credit all to herself, kind of the old fashioned way where the lead gets all the credit and the people who help don't. Susan painted the model all by herself. It's just that was a nightmare. She had to do all that taping off and painting the different colored shades of gray and kind of a bluish gray. She was a very good model maker. I just think that she had a lot of distractions because she also helped run VCE. She was very busy, and I know she wanted her piece. And so I went home and not thinking I'd ever hear from her again. However, I did. I was very excited, and I thought, wow, she actually wants to hire me back for something. And she said it's on the same movie, and it's to make the ice cavern. This time, though, I'd have to quit my job because she would need me full time. And I said, okay, whatever. Well, the place that they wanted us to build that cave, ice cave, was where they had shot at one time Battlestar Galactica and Buck Rogers. And I didn't know that at the time, but it's also where they have the makeup crew doing all the creature effects. So when I went down there, boy, it was, you talk about security. They grilled me when I came through the front door and had Susan come up and take me into the back room. The facility was called Universal Heartland Facility. Rob Bottin actually gave us a walkthrough, and it was really nice. Seeing the different makeup and processes. The first day we were there, she wanted us to start working, but we couldn't because the lumber hadn't been delivered yet that we needed to make the miniature set. And the next day, sure enough, the lumber was there. I couldn't really see around. They only had one big work light there, and that was on a stand. And I didn't realize that I was sawing and cutting on these metal structures. They were actually the Battlestar Galactica model movers. I had never seen one up close, and I didn't know, and didn't seem like it was a problem at the time, me cutting wood on them. Susan would go out and get some supplies that we needed. She focused on the miniature buckets that she was going to dive into while I finished building the miniature set. And it had two pieces, one huge one and one small one where the miniature steps would go up. And the backing was a huge block of foam. I really didn't feel comfortable doing the fine detail. That was something that Susan liked to do, but she didn't like doing the foam, but she did do it. So she did gouge and, make the ice wall that went behind the set. Now, while I was cutting that piece and gluing it together and making the different stages, they had little recesses in it. In walks Kurt Russell, and I didn't know who walked in. And I looked up, and he's in his full parka and everything. And I just looked up like, oh my gosh, that's Kurt Russell. And I had never met a star before, so I just said, "Oh, hello," and he said, "Hi back." And I just went back to doing my job. I really wanted his autograph, but you know, it was something that Susan frowned upon. She just felt to keep me away from me saying anything wrong that I was non-union. I started also working on the ceiling pieces, which had to overhang but had to remain wide open so that the animator could get in there. The set was up off the floor at least 5 feet, probably 5 feet. That way the animator could get underneath. I was working on the ceiling, had to do the ceiling pipes, and Susan was wondering what we could come up with that would look like stalactites type of thing, icicles hanging from the pipes. I came up with using rubber caulking since it was clear, and it would be okay if somebody bumped it because they were rubber, and then it just would pull right back to the same shape. And they were kind of complicated because they had to hang there, but they had to be able to get out of the way. So you had to be able to lift them up and out because they hang really low down to the set. I know Randy the animator didn't like them at all, and eventually he would cut them completely off. And I don't blame him. It was a lot of problems. He didn't want to bump them. The barrels were actually handmade at a cardboard shop that made cardboard tubing, mostly probably for carpets. But they did it to the exact diameter that we needed, which was wonderful. And all I would have to do is take a chop saw and chop them to the right length. So both the paint cans, which were made out of the plastic tubing, and that would take up my time cutting a lot of those paint cans and a lot of those barrels. Susan liked to do some of the small detail. She really liked putting in the real small stuff. So that we worked out really well. I'd hammer out the bigger stuff, and then she would take it over and do some of the smaller detail. She came up with using white glue and soda on the bottom of the set to make it look like there was snow. And she also built a little plunger, and she had someone turn the miniature bottle, but we cast them up. I cast them out of RTV and resin, and then she painted them. She had fun doing all that and taking all the oil barrels and dusting them. She'd spray it with spray adhesive and then dust it with soda, just regular baking soda, and then placing them in the set. And it started to look real good. I got to see Randy's sculpture. I know that Susan was really worried about the union. And one time when she was out getting supplies, probably working at VCE too, that I got a phone call. They had a phone there for us. And I picked it up, and it was the gal at the front desk, security desk, saying, "You need to get out now." And I said, "Out where?" And she goes, "I don't care, just leave." And so I thought, well, Susan's not here. I can't tell anybody. So I went out one of our side doors. I figured an hour from then I could just come back. So I did. And Susan was all angry with me and everything. And I told her the reason why they told me to get out and there was no way for me to contact. She was like, oh, all right. But another time, Susan liked to kind of nosy around, and I was too terrified thinking there were cameras everywhere. Then I started sneaking around and found that they had moved the models from Battlestar Galactica and Buck Rogers in another room, and it was on behind cages. And I got to drool over all that and see all those things in the Galactica and all of the model pieces that were still on tables. And Jim Pearl took one picture of me sitting on the set. It was fun to look around the place during my lunch, and I could see where, Buck Rogers was still being filmed, and it looked as if they literally shut down right in the middle of their coffee. And it's too bad that it seemed like somebody had just come in and said, get out. So, yeah, there were still plates with uneaten, like donuts and things that were lying around on some of the work desks way in the back. A couple of models were still there. And I got to see a lot of models and stuff one to one that I just was really, it was really wonderful to see that. My first time out in the movie industry and being able to just absorb all what I was seeing.